This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The Danish embassy in the Pakistani capital, Islamabad, was rocked today by a car bomb explosion. The suspected car was left in the parking garage of the headquarters of the Danish embassy compound. This explosion comes despite the heightened security measures taken by the Pakistani government. No claims of responsibility and no final casualty tolls have been given in this incident, which comes in response to the publication of the Danish cartoons defaming the Prophet Muhammad, peace and prayers be upon him.
Today, what everyone has feared to happen in Pakistan happened. The Danish flag plummeted amidst the rubble following a car bomb attack on the headquarters of the Danish embassy compound. The explosion, which took place in the embassy's parking area, caused partial damage to the compound and extensive damage to the nearby buildings. The Pakistani police and security forces rushed to the scene and immediately sealed off the area. They also launched an investigation into the explosion, which was so powerful that the body parts of the victims were scattered all over the area.
Based on information we have gathered, a car bomb exploded in this area. We are not sure whether or not the attack was carried out by a suicide bomber. Several Pakistani people were killed, and several others were wounded in the blast. There were no foreigners among the victims.
The heavy medical presence witnessed in the area suggests a high casualty toll, which could be announced at a later time. At the scene of the blast, which has left behind a 3-meter deep crater, nothing has left from the exploded car except its engine. Meanwhile, many Pakistanis are asking who might be responsible for the attack.
It might be a response to the Danish cartoons, defaming the character of the noble prophet, praise be upon him. Cartoons have triggered massive protests around the country. Although it is very hard to confirm at this time, I think some armed groups or extremists are behind the incident.
This blast, which comes despite the heightened security measures implemented in and around the Danish embassy, could lead to sharp criticism of the law enforcement agencies in Islamabad, where several political leaders have called for the expulsion of the Danish ambassador to Islamabad. While everyone is waiting for the outcome of the investigation, the primary loser, along with the Danes, is the people's-led government that took over authority amidst a wave of attacks and security deterioration. Meanwhile, the People's Party and President Musharraf are facing a big challenge of how to avoid any negative impact on the relationship between their country and the West.
سلم حزب الله اللبناني أشلاء جنود إسرائيليين قتلوا خلال الحرب ضد إسرائيل عام 2006.
Lebanon's Hezbollah gave Red Cross International the body parts of Israeli soldiers killed in the war with Israel in 2006. At the same time, Israel released a Lebanese prisoner who had completed a 6-year prison term for charges of spying. The release of the prisoner, Nassim Nisser, suggests progress in the indirect talks between Israel and Hezbollah for a larger prison swap. The swap took place during a formal visit by Germany's foreign minister to the Lebanese president, Michel Suleiman. He affirmed the importance of abandoning violence and weapons and dealing with internal conflicts in Lebanon, as well as the disarming of the militias. This is within the framework of national dialogue, which will take place under the auspices of the Lebanese president.
ذهب عميلا وعاد أسيرا محررا من السجون الإسرائيلية.
The Lebanese prisoner Nassim Nisser left as a secret agent and returned as a released prisoner from Israeli jails. He was released by Israel today after 6 years of being arrested in Israel under charges of spying for Hezbollah. He was swapped for the body parts of Israeli soldiers who were killed in the July war in 2006. The people of the south welcomed Nassim with jubilation. They accompanied him from the point of exchange at the Naqoura crossing, where he was received by Hezbollah, the Lebanese army, and the international forces of the Red Cross. A large public ceremony was held in the town of Naqoura, It included speeches affirming the importance of resistance as a strategy to liberate the land and the people. Another ceremony was also held in Nisr's hometown, Al-Bazouriya. Today's swap is seen as a precursor for a larger exchange deal expected to take place in the very near future. The larger swap would include the release of all Lebanese prisoners from Israeli prisons, starting with Samir al-Qintar, as well as turning over the corpses of Lebanese resistance fighters. In exchange, the 2 Israeli soldiers imprisoned by Hezbollah would be released, as well as the remaining body parts of Israeli soldiers. Nisr was born in the south of Lebanon, to a Lebanese father and a Jewish mother who converted to Islam. He went to Israel for the reason of improving his social situation, which made everyone think that he was a collaborator. After 10 years of living in Israel, he was arrested when it was discovered that he had been working as a Hezbollah spy. Nassim had married an Israeli woman and they had 3 children. He had to give up his family and his Israeli citizenship in exchange for his return to his homeland as a free man.
In spite of all the internal problems and divisions, Hezbollah has never forgotten the prisoners. The release of prisoners has always been a priority for the resistance. Rule, honor, and freedom are incomplete as long as there is one prisoner in Israeli jails.
While the South was greeting Nassim Nisr, the Lebanese leaders were greeting the German Foreign Minister, Frank Steinmeier. Steinmeier congratulated the President of the Republic, General Michel Suleiman. He said it was important for everyone to abide by the Doha Agreement, to form the government, and to rebuild the sovereignty and power of Lebanon's leadership. Meanwhile, the formation of the government had entered a phase beset with demands and counter-demands between the opposition and the government allies. The assigned Prime Minister Fouad al-Sanyoura refused to abide by the time frame for forming the government. He called on the new President of the Republic to help solve the problems around the ministerial seats, particularly in the executive and the service sectors. Suleiman responded with an affirmation of his commitment to the Doha Agreement regarding the formation of the government and the division and the balance of ministerial seats. Thus far, no one knows how long Suleiman and Sanyoura will continue to sift through the names, the demands, and the conditions of the sides. No one knows who will be chosen and who will be filtered out. But one thing is certain: everyone's ego is much more powerful than any other disaster. For Al Madar program, Ula Al-Mallah, Abu Dhabi TV, Beirut.
Top story, Prime Minister Ehud Olmert is meeting at this hour with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas at his Jerusalem residence. Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni and Chief Palestinian Negotiator Ahmed Correa are also participating. On the agenda, peace negotiations ahead of Olmert's upcoming trip to Washington, as well as attempts to achieve a ceasefire in Gaza. Looming over the talks are ongoing corruption investigations into the Prime Minister, which are likely to call into question his ability to deliver on any peace deal. Nevertheless, Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni, who heads Israel's negotiating team, said that talks are advancing and that core issues are on the table.
The Lebanese media reported today that Hezbollah is still in possession of more body parts of Israeli soldiers killed in the Second Lebanon War in 2006. The remains that Hezbollah transferred yesterday were taken to the Abu Kabir Forensic Institute. Pathologists have begun examining the remains and hope to come up with positive identification, possibly in as little as 2 days, although it could take longer. The Army says it has a list of 9 soldiers killed in 2006 who were not buried intact, and that the pathologist will attempt to match up the remains with those soldiers, after which the additional remains will also be buried. The IDF has appointed a team headed by Major General Elazar Stern to update the families with the results of the identification efforts.
Hezbollah and Israel could be very close to a significant prisoner exchange. German Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier, who has been active in brokering a deal, held talks today in Jerusalem with Defense Minister Ehud Barak and Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni. He likely briefed the pair on a 2-stage prisoner swap brokered by a member of Germany's intelligence service. Hezbollah terror boss Hassan Nasrallah has reportedly agreed to the deal and is awaiting Israel's response. According to the German paper Der Spiegel, Part 1 of the plan calls for Israel to free Samir Qintar, who shot a man to death in front of his daughter and then crushed the little girl's skull. In addition to Qintar, Israel will release 4 Hezbollah prisoners plus the bodies of Hezbollah fighters. In exchange, Israel will receive the bodies of kidnapped soldiers Eldad Regev and Ehud Goldwasser. Their deaths have not been confirmed, but according to Der Spiegel, the German mediator believes they are no longer alive. Israel will also get information on the fate of missing navigator Ron Arad, who was shot down in 1986. Phase 2 of the plan calls for Israel to release dozens of Palestinian prisoners.
Election politics made their way into the Knesset today during the appearance of Defense Minister Ehud Barak before the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. Barak himself chose to focus on Syria, saying that the chances for peace talks with Damascus would bear fruit this year are slim. He also told committee members that Israel and Hamas are on a crash course. He added that a great deal of pressure has been placed on the terror group following the elimination of some 70 terrorists in the past 2 months and more than 300 within the past half a year. The defense minister also praised Egypt for improvements in its efforts to prevent weapons smuggling into Gaza. But committee MKs took the opportunity to criticize Barak for what they termed empty threats to dissolve the government in the wake of the latest allegations facing Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. Several opposition MKs told IBA's Aaron Viner that Barak must make good on his promise.
I think that the main message I got from this briefing is that Israel doesn't have an effective government and doesn't have any legitimate process of decision-making, while the Minister of Defense made a declaration that the Prime Minister is incapable of doing both, defending himself in court and yet being able to deal with the challenges of the state.
Today we are worried more even than I was before, because I saw that the main problem that Israel have to deal with now, like Gaza and Hamas and Hezbollah and Syria and Iran, no one can take decision, right decision how to take care of those problems. And one thing that I think that we have to do now as a parliament is to decide to get new elections.
There is no question that the internal situation has its effect on the international arena and on the policy.
ولكن دكتور أحمد السؤال كان بمعنى أنه فلسطين إلى أين فيما لو
Dr. Ahmed Al-Taibi, the question is, what will happen to the Palestinian-Israeli peace track if progress is achieved in the Israeli-Arab peace negotiations? Today, there are negotiations over occupied Syrian land, not over Palestinian land.
يعني هو الشيء المثالي والأفضل عربيا كان.
Ideally, all Arabs should have negotiated and made a peace deal with Israel as one entity to end the occupation of all Arab land, including the Palestinian territories. However, this is a utopia. Everyone wishes that this had happened. Israel has always held bilateral negotiations with different Arab parties. I was hoping that the world would be more receptive to the Arab Peace Initiative, which was first approved at the Arab League Summit in Beirut. I think this could have been a historical peace initiative for all parties, but the Israeli side rejected the Arab Peace Initiative and did not deal with it in a serious manner. Also, the Arab countries did not promote their peace initiative to the international community. The American administration only expressed timid verbal support to the Arab peace initiative. However, in theory, the most ideal solution, which is better than the separate bilateral peace tracks, remains the Arab peace initiative. These separate peace tracks are bilateral in nature, but the end has to be a comprehensive Arab-Israeli peace agreement, not bilateral.
ولكن في نهاية مطاف الحل سيكون عربيا إسرائيليا شاملا وليس ثنائيا.
طيب دكتور، هل تعتقد أن العقدة تكمن فقط فيما ذكرته بأن أولمرت اليوم يلفظ أنفاسه الأخيرة؟
The problem, as you said, is the fact that the Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert is taking his final breaths. He is facing bribery accusations and so on. Are there other obstacles, such as the Israeli conditions which Syria refuses to implement? Some of these conditions pertain to cutting Syrian ties with Iran, Hezbollah and Hamas.
في الماضي لم تكن هكذا شروط وبالرغم من ذلك ولم تكن هكذا.
In the past, there were no such conditions and there were no such Israeli demands. And despite this, the Israeli side reversed its decision and refused to withdraw to the 1967 borders. This is why no agreement was made with the late President Hafez al-Assad. Now we have different regional and strategic conditions pertaining to Iran and Hamas. The Israelis have talked about this, but they have never made it a condition for starting the negotiations. What proves this is the fact that Israel has entered indirect negotiations with Syria without making such conditions. Without a doubt, the negotiations began based on public Israeli statements. Such demands might be made in the future, or they might be put on the negotiating table in a stronger manner. I don't think that this will help the peace negotiations to go forward. Moreover, I think that such conditions are impossible to achieve. Hypothetically speaking, when Syria is asked to cut its ties with Iran, then Syria can also ask Israel to cut its ties with the US. I'm using this example to show that making such a demand is silly. No one can impose on a negotiating partner such conditions, especially when considering that the negotiating partner is considered an enemy who is negotiating the return of its occupied land. It is impossible to make such a demand of a sovereign country.
برأيك لا يمكن لسوريا أن تقبل بهذه الشروط حتى ولو
In your opinion, can Syria accept such conditions if Israel agrees to withdraw from the Golan Heights up to the 1967 borders?
The most important thing is that Israel withdraws back to the 1967 borders. Returning the occupied Arab Golan Heights to Syria is the most important matter. The Syrian position pertaining to these conditions has been announced, and I'm sure that the Israeli negotiators will be notified either directly or indirectly if the negotiations were to become direct negotiations. But at this moment, I do not think this is likely to happen.
The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Mohammed al-Baradei, said that a team from the agency will visit Syria on June 22nd to investigate U.S. reports that Damascus was secretly building a nuclear reactor.
During a meeting of the agency's Board of Governors, Baradei clarified that he will consider Syria's full response to the agency. He criticized Israel and the United States for not providing information on the alleged reactor and attacking the site before giving the IAEA a chance to inspect it.
The International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA, is preparing to send a delegation on June 22nd to investigate Israeli and U.S. allegations that Syria had begun working on a secret nuclear program. The U.S.-Israeli accusations came after Israel attacked a target inside Syria last September. They said that a secret nuclear reactor was constructed with the cooperation of North Korea. The United States claimed that the nuclear reactor was nearing the operational phase. Mohammed al-Baradei, the general director of the IAEA, criticized the Israeli attack and described it as undermining the effectiveness of inspections. However, at the same time, he pledged to investigate the information that the U.S. published, which included photos taken of the alleged site. IAEA officials said that had the U.S. shared their information, the agency would have been in a better position to investigate the accuracy of the data. The IAEA denied that the latest information provided by the United States was proof of the allegations against Syria, especially since they do not indicate what type of fuel was used. The U.S. said that it had been necessary to conceal the information out of fear that Syria would carry out a retaliation. Syria likened the Israeli-American accusations to those allegations that the U.S. used as a pretext to go to war against Iraq, which were Iraq's possession of weapons of mass destruction, later proven to be false. For its part, the United States denied having given Israel the green light to carry out a military operation against Syria. The U.S. insisted that the information it presented about a Syrian nuclear project was correct and accused Syria of cleaning up the site. And what assisted it in this was the belated announcement of the reasons behind the Israeli attack.
تظاهر الآلاف من أنصار التيار الصدري في مدينة الصدر العراقية وأنحاء متفرقة.
In Sadr city and across various neighborhoods in Baghdad, thousands of Sadr supporters demonstrated against the proposed Iraqi-US agreement. Thousands of Iraqis took to the streets after Friday's prayer. The protesters condemned the agreement and called for the occupation forces to leave Iraq. They repeated slogans demanding an end to making agreements which legitimize and legalize the existence of the occupation. A leader from the Sadr movement, Sheikh Mohammed al-Ghazawi, explained that the agreement gives up 99% of Iraq to Washington. Meanwhile, thousands of citizens in Basra in southern Iraq demonstrated after the Friday prayer, also protesting against the agreement. The protesters carried banners calling for the withdrawal of the U.S. occupation from Iraq.
The security agreement that the U.S. government is trying to impose in Iraq was the focus of the local Friday prayer sermon. The sermon was held by the Sadr movement in the area of Hamsa Mil in the center of Basra. Sheikh Salah al-Ubaidi stressed the Sadr movement's rejection of this agreement. He called on officials in the Iraqi government to not sign the agreement so as to avoid the anger of the Iraqi people.
The demonstration that took place today in the city of Basra was in response to Muqtada al-Sadr's invitation. He had called on supporting all attempts, political and non-political, that are against the agreement. This is after the religious authorities had expressed their refusal of this agreement.
We, as followers of the Sadr movement, completely refuse any agreement between the Iraqi government and the government of the United States, the occupation forces in Iraq. We believe that this agreement will be dead before it is even born, because it breaches international law.
After the prayer, the participants went out to form a large demonstration in order to express their refusal of the agreement. They confirmed their commitment to the Council of Religious Authorities of the higher order, who forbade such agreements. The demonstrators repeated slogans calling for the occupation forces to leave Iraq.
They want to use Iraq as a base to strike neighboring countries, and we will not let that happen. This agreement will affect the whole of the Middle East due to Iraq's strategic location. Geographically and economically, it is strategic for Iraqis and neighboring countries. We reject this agreement.
This agreement is rejected by all sides. It harms the sovereignty and independence of the Republic of Iraq. The agreement is rejected by a number of religious authorities, as they have expressed in an official statement.
The demonstration took place under heightened security aimed at protecting the protesters. Many Iraqi parliament members from the Sadr movement participated in the demonstration. There are many banners in the city of Basra, which express the people's rejection of the security agreement which the U.S. government plans to impose on Iraq. Nama Abdel Razak, Al-Alam, Basra.
The U.S. Special Envoy to Sudan, Richard Williamson, is making shuttle visits between the North and the South to speak to the official of the ruling National Congress Party and the Sudan's People Liberation Movement in an attempt to resolve the Abyei crisis. Williamson warned that a failure of his mission will end a chance to achieve real peace in Sudan.
The efforts being exerted by the special U.S. envoy to contain the growing conflict between the North and the South in Sudan are the latest serious efforts that may be able to ease the growing tension between the two sides before the situation gets worse. To a large degree, the United States was behind the peace which was achieved 4 years ago between the North and the South. However, oil-rich Arabiya, whose residents, the African Denk tribe and the Arab Muthariya tribe, who have previously participated in the peace, remained a point of contention amidst an atmosphere of distrust. Khartoum suggested a joint administration of the region. However, southern officials rejected this proposal and requested the Sudanese president to personally intervene to withdraw the 31 lieutenants of the Sudanese army from Abyei. The Sudanese vice president of the southern government, Salva Kiir Mayardit, accused the north of amassing additional forces in the region. The northerners, for their part, accused the People's Liberation Movement of starting the fighting and appointing an administrative government in Abyei without consulting Khartoum. Amidst intense efforts to reduce the severity of the crisis, as well as an exchange of accusations between both sides, it appears that the solution is difficult, but it is the only way to avoid a return to war between the sides. If the latest clashes, which led to the killing of tens of people and the displacement of 90,000 others, were the spark, then should the crisis is not resolved by next year, then the upcoming war will make all efforts for peace in Sudan moot.
Now let's look at some other news of the day. They dream of spending their days at school and at play, but for thousands of children in Afghanistan, the daily reality is instead long days of hard work. Those as young as 4 years old are being forced to work in brick factories where they can face up to 12 hours of hard labour to try to help pay off family debts. Teresa Bo went to the town of Sokhrod to meet some of the youngsters losing their childhood to slavery.
Not far away from the city of Jalalabad, in a district well known for the bricks it produces, these children have lost their innocence a long time ago.
I don't want to do this in my life. I want to go to school, but I cannot do it because I'm poor. My family is in debt for $800 and I have to work.
They're working to pay off their parents' debt, a debt acquired in Pakistan with the owner of this factory. The family needed the money to be able to come back to Afghanistan after the fall of the Taliban in 2001.
While we are in debt, we cannot study. I have to work to pay my family's debt and our expenses. But one day I want to be a teacher to teach others.
There are around 38 factories like this one in the Sokhrod district. And in them, around 2,200 children are losing their chance for an education because they have to work.
This baby is 11 months old. Her father told us that as soon as she reaches the age of 4, she will have to start working here.
There are around 550 families living here. Each one of them makes around $6 a day. Most of them find it difficult to pay off their debt because they have to use their salary to survive. The brick factory's owner says that he gave the money to these families a long time ago and that he won't let them go until they pay him back.
They are bonded labor. I am holding them. They don't have any other option. They have to, like a slave, work for me. Each family owes me thousands of Afghanis. They have to pay me with their work.
Children work here between 8 and 12 hours every day, and this job poses a serious threat to their health. Some sustain serious injuries such as broken bones because of the heavy nature of brick-making labor. During our visit, this boy was injured when a pile of bricks fell on top of him. And many others continue to work in spite of their inability to do so. The government says that they're encouraging NGOs and aid agencies to help indebted families pay off their debts. But many here have doubts about the will of the government to help them.
If we don't pay them, they won't let us go. They are powerful people. They have guns and they know people in the government. My life is destroyed. I'm worried about the future of my children.
A future that seems hopeless and full of despair, because these children know that for now they will be in debt for life. Teresa Bo, Al Jazeera, Sokhrod, Afghanistan.
Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/Mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic video podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.